American strength and vitality. I thank the chair and would yield the floor.
Madam President,
Senator from Kentucky.
we had an election a few months ago, and in that election the American people sent a message that they were concerned about the debt, concerned about our kids and our grandkids and how this debt is going to be handed down to future generations. I'm not only concerned about that, I'm concerned about the imminent threat that this debt poses for our economy and for our people. We're spending about $10 billion a day. Of the $10 billion a day we're spending, we're borrowing about $4 billion. How big is a billion? It's hard for most of us to fathom how big a billion is. A billion seconds ago, I was in high school. A billion minutes ago, Jesus was alive. A billion hours ago, we were in the Stone Age. But $1 billion ago, at the rate the government spends it, was only a few minutes ago. The government is spending money like there's no tomorrow, and we had an election and we thought as voters we sent a message to this place, but it's not getting through. The President gave us a budget. His proposal for 10 years is to spend $46 trillion. Now, how big is $1 trillion? I mean, it's hard to fathom $1 billion, much less $1 trillion. $1 trillion. It's hard to imagine. It boggles the mind. If we had $1,000 bills and I stack them in my hand, a stack of $1,000 bills 4 inches high would be $1 million. But if I want to have $1 trillion in $100 bills, it would be 67 miles high. Why do these numbers mean anything to you? Why does the deficit or the debt mean anything to you? Because it really is stealing from our future. We have to do something about it, and I think I agree with the senator from Alabama that it is really a threat to our future, that we could have a crisis come upon us where we can't manage our debt. How do you pay for your debt? You can either tax people. Most of us think we're already taxed enough already. We're not willing to pay more than 40% of our income for taxes. You can borrow, but we've borrowed an enormous amount. We now owe the Chinese $800 billion, the Japanese $700 billion. The list goes on and on. We owe the Russians nearly $200 billion. We owe Mexico $20 billion. The list goes on and on. Where we were once a great nation that exported goods to the world, our #1 export is our debt. But what happens when foreign countries quit buying our debt, or when the interest we have to pay them exceeds what we're able to pay? Most of the estimates on what we will be paying, or the President's estimates, are saying we'll have a 3.5% interest rate. I remember 1979, though, when interest rates went to 21%. If that happens, interest will consume the budget, and we'll have very little left for anything else. As it is, the course we are on, if we do nothing, if we just keep spending the way we're spending it, entitlements and interest consume the whole budget within a decade. That's with conservative estimates on interest. Imagine what happens if interest rates begin to rise like they did in the 1970s, and some are predicting that this could happen. Now, recently, you've been hearing in the news that some members on the other side of the aisle, members of their leadership, are saying, well, this is all well and good, but those over here, we're mistaken that there's any problem with Social Security. They say Social Security is not adding anything to the debt. They say Social Security is not adding 1 penny to the debt. I'm pretty new up here, but Washington math that says we're not adding to the debt with Social Security is flatly wrong. I have a couple charts with me here. Over here's what we bring in Social Security taxes, your payroll taxes, your FICA taxes. Here's what we spend to Social Security recipients. This is what we bring in. This is what we spend. We are now, for the first time, spending more than we take in. Well, the other side will tell you, they'll say, well, it's really not so bad. We have interest payments that fill in the difference here. They say Social Security's fine, has all these surpluses. If you go to the Social Security office, you'll find a stack of paper. These are Treasury bills. They're non-negotiable. They cannot be traded to anyone. We own them, and we pay ourselves interest on the Social Security surplus. How do we pay the interest? We borrow it from China. So to make up this difference, for them to say Social Security is on solid footing and that we're simply paying and spending the interest that brings in, it's a lie. The interest is paid by borrowing from China. We're borrowing nearly $2 trillion a year. The senator from Alabama showed you the statistics. Even though the deficit, official deficit, will be like 1.5 or 1.6 trillion, the debt limit, if you watch closely in a month, will go up 2 trillion. All kinds of things they don't count, off-budget items, money they borrow from places. The truth of the matter is we have to wake up and say our entitlements are unsound. Nobody wants to hear that, and people say you can't be elected by saying that. Well, guess what? It's the truth, and if we do not speak the truth to our problems, we will eventually and ultimately encounter a crisis in our country, and I'm for averting that crisis. I think the President has abdicated in his leadership. We have this enormous problem, and he's giving us $46 trillion worth of spending, annual deficits of $1 trillion that go to the end of time, and he's abdicated his duty. The entitlement system is broken. I didn't break it. I'm not responsible for the baby boom. We have all these people that were born after the war, and they're retiring. It just is happening. We have fewer workers. Once upon a time, we had over 50 workers for every retiree. It worked. Once upon a time, people lived with an average life expectancy of 65. Social Security worked in the beginning, worked for many years. We're now down to less than 3 workers for 1 retiree, and it's not working. And we have a huge amount of people retiring. It's nobody's fault, but what we want is leadership. Where is the leadership in Washington to say the entitlements are broken? And we have to do something about it. May not be popular, but can we not say that someone should lead? The President is failing us and is not leading here. We need leadership. How do you fix Social Security? Here's what happens if you do nothing. Look at the red ink. It piles on. This year alone, $37 billion we'll have to borrow to pay for Social Security. It goes up to over $100 billion within a decade. How do you fix Social Security? It's very simple. Everybody knows it, but everybody wants to be quiet. No one wants to say it. I will say it. The age of Social Security will have to gradually rise. I've said it. I've said it repeatedly. I don't want it necessarily. I don't want to have to do the things we have to do, but someone has to stand up and say that it has to be done. And you can do it gradually. You can raise the age or allow the age to rise slowly for those 55 and under, and you can fix Social Security by doing that. That alone fixes at least half or more of the problem. You let it rise gradually on the younger people. Now, there is an alternative. If we stick our head in the sand and say, do nothing, we're not touching Social Security, we're not touching Medicare, we're afraid to lead, wait to let the President lead someday, if we do that, the systems run into the ground. It's a problem. What happened in Greece when they ran into a debt crisis? They changed the age of eligibility for their entitlements overnight. That's much more difficult. When you're 67 and all of a sudden somebody tells you you don't get it for another year and you planned on it, that's very difficult. But what if we say gradually to those my age and younger, tell them that you will have to make adjustments because we don't have enough money? You know what? I think young people already realize it. These young people here, if they're listening to this debate, they know Social Security's broken, Medicare's broken. It won't be there for them unless we fix it. So we need to be the responsible adults. We need to fix these problems, and they can be. Next week, I and a couple of other senators will present a fix for Social Security that fixes Social Security in perpetuity. That's a long time, forever. We will fix Social Security by allowing the age to rise gradually on younger people and by saying to those who will retire, the younger people again, that you may not get as much out of it as some other people get. Basically, there will have to be some testing that says that when you're in a higher income bracket, that your Social Security payments will not rise as rapidly as some others will. It's the only way you fix it. But those two changes fix Social Security forever if we're willing to do it. The question is, if you speak boldly, if you lead, is that a detriment or an asset? I personally think it's the right thing to do, but I also think it's an asset, and I think the people will understand when you lead that you have to make difficult choices. We've been kicking the can down the road, borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and I think we're coming to a point in time where it has to end. It's going to end either voluntarily and gradually, if we can promote a solution, or it can end with a bang. A bang is a crisis. I don't want that to happen. I want it to happen gradually in a very rational and reasonable manner, and I think we can do it. But I think what we're finding from the other side and from the President is a failure to lead. I propose that we have new leadership, and we're going to need new leadership if we're going to get this debt under control. And I think at the very least we need to have this conversation, and I'm glad we're having it. I yield the floor.
Madam President. Senator from Alaska. Thank you, Madam President. Clearly some very, very serious subjects that are being discussed today. I applaud my colleague from Kentucky for bringing up the tough stuff. We cannot escape our reality, and our reality is, as he says, it is in the entitlements that we will finally grapple with the insurmountable debt that we are faced with as a nation. Some very, very difficult issues in front of us with equally difficult solutions. So as we stand and present them, try to educate one another, much less those that we represent across the countries, this is a critical time for us to be having these discussions, to talk about all the things that need to be on the table. Well, one of the things that is being discussed around family dinner tables in the evening is what is happening in this country as it relates to the price of oil and how that translates more personally to American families who every time they go to fill up the car or the minivan or whatever it is that they're driving, it is costing them more and more. Every time you pick up a newspaper, every time you turn on the TV, we're seeing a story about the rising prices of oil. And they're asking, well, why? What's going on? I mean, obviously, they look at the situation in the Middle East and the combination of international events that is driving it. But, Madam President, it's also our domestic policies in this country that have helped to push oil above $100 a barrel. I think all of us here are concerned about what those higher prices mean for us as a nation. We're absolutely committed to protecting the American people and our businesses, and how we ensure that we have an ability to deal with these rising prices at the same time that we're trying to crawl out from this difficult recessionary period. This is a tough time for us. So I've come to the floor today to outline several steps that I think that we can and we should take to improve our nation's energy policy. First, I want to touch just for a moment on how we again find ourselves in this situation. The civil unrest that we're seeing, the political instability in other nations are certainly not new. They're facts of life in many of the nations that provide this nation's imports. Iran now holds OPEC's presidency. They're perfectly comfortable with $100 barrel oil, and it's far from guaranteed that OPEC is even capable of moderating any prices in the way that it claims that they can with spare capacity. With Libya's supply either offline or unreliable, any other disruption, any kind, anywhere in the world, can likely spike global oil prices to levels that will swamp our economic recovery and result in truly a genuine hardship for America's family. Now, I suggested at the beginning of my comments that it's not just the situation internationally that has brought us to this point. The costs and consequences associated with our dependence on foreign oil are largely our own fault. We have brought this upon ourselves. Over the years, our lands have been locked up. Many of our most promising opportunities have been completely put out of reach. Here in this country, we sit on tremendous oil reserves in the offshore, whether it's up in Alaska, offshore in the Chukchi or the Beaufort, whether it's in the Gulf of Mexico. We have onshore opportunities in my home state that are inconsiderable. We have them in the Rocky Mountain West. We have massive shale formations that aren't even accessible for research and development. We can't even begin to look. Charles Krauthammer, who's the columnist, wrote last year, he says, we haven't run out of safer and more easily accessible sources of oil. We've been run off them. I couldn't agree with him more. Today, our energy policy has gone beyond frustrating. It's irresponsible. It's simply irresponsible at times. The American people expect their government to help keep energy affordable and to see to it that we can benefit from our natural resource development in a responsible way. That's what they're asking for. They expect us to take an honest look at where increased domestic production is possible, how it can protect against the higher prices like we're seeing now, how it can protect against potential supply disruption, and what it will do, what domestic production will do to increase our security, restore our trade balance. That's what we're all talking about here on the floor today. Generate government revenues, create jobs. Right now, when we import oil, we are exporting those benefits. It's our loss and it's their gain. And we ignore the positive benefits of domestic production, I think, really at our own peril. About a month ago, we had a hearing in the Energy Committee, and there was a statement that was presented in hearing. It's a statement that comes out of the Bipartisan Policy Center, and it's a pretty sobering reminder to us all. The statement was, a $1 one-day increase in a barrel of oil takes $12 million out of the U.S. economy. If tensions in the Mideast cause oil prices to rise by $5 for just even 3 months, over $5 billion will leave the U.S. economy. Obviously, this is not a strategy for creating new jobs. This was the statement from the Bipartisan Policy Center. That was about a month ago. So think about what's happened in the course of a month and where we've seen the price of oil go. About a month ago, it was sitting at about $82 a barrel. We're now over $100 a barrel. We're looking at $20 in the past month. And what that means to us in terms of dollars that have been sent outside of our economy, it's about $15 billion. Last year, putting in context of what went on last year in this country, we spent an estimated $337 billion on oil imports last year, a huge amount of money for us. And as we're talking about how we deal with budget battles and decide which programs and services to continue, to terminate, this has incredible impact on the discussion. So today I'm renewing my call for a realistic and really a very aggressive approach to our energy challenges for the sake of our national security, for the sake of our economy, and for the sake of the world's environment. America should produce as much oil as it uses as is possible. And it's this balance, in concert with the resulting revenues that we will see, the benefits to our manufacturing, our transportation industries, that will really allow us to take control of our energy future. Now, I've got 5 concepts that will support greater domestic oil production, and I'm just going to speak very, very briefly because we'll have time to develop this out. But first of all, look north to Alaska. We used to have that on our license plates, north to Alaska. We have an incredible supply of oil just waiting to be tapped for the good of the nation. The National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, sitting there waiting. 2,000 acres of the non-wilderness portion of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seas hold at least 40 billion barrels of recoverable oil. That's enough to replace crude imports from the Persian Gulf for over 65 years. And we can do this in one state. We've got those opportunities in Alaska. And all three areas right now, as we speak, are effectively off limits to new development because of decisions that have been made by this administration or prior administrations. We've got an opportunity if we just look north. Second, end the permitorium and bring back production in the Gulf of Mexico. This administration has slowed the permits for new deepwater development to practically a crawl. The Secretary of Interior has announced one new permit a couple days ago. That's a start, most clearly, but we are just barely crawling. This could cost the United States an estimated 200,000 barrels of new supply if left in place for a year, far more if left in place longer, and tens of thousands of jobs in the meantime. Courts have also ruled, repeatedly I might add, that the administration's permitorium is unlawful. A district court judge ruled last year that it was arbitrary and capricious, and then more recently, the Interior Department was actually held in contempt for its dismissive conduct and determined disregard. These are the court's words of previous orders to end its de facto moratorium. The third item that we can do, let's cut the red tape. Let's make this work. In January, the President ordered his executive agencies to review their regulations to ensure that they're cost-effective, that they're not unduly damaging economic growth and job creation. Great task, necessary. The Interior Department, though, is sitting in a situation where they've got an awful lot of work to do. In late 2008, the Interior Department stated that the number of required plan and permit approvals is on the order of about 25 to 30 for a typical oil lease. 25 to 30 for a typical oil lease. And yet over the past 2 years, instead of reducing that, this administration has sought to add even more layers to these already significant requirements, which are really a major reason why leaseholders need years to begin production. We just can't get to it. The fourth thing that we need to look at is truly how we as a nation consider this all of the above energy policy. The alternatives to conventional oil, to natural gas, to coal, should not be limited to just kind of the favored sources, wind, solar, geothermal. We have so much that we can be doing. I think we recognize that. I have stood before this body on so many occasions, talked about the different ways that we can build out our energy portfolio, how we can work to move our transportation fleet to that next generation, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's fleets powered by natural gas. The final item in terms of what we can do to help address our nation's energy policy. We need to shelve the bad ideas. There's an awful lot of bad ideas out there that are holding us up. And this is kind of the stop the bleeding element of the proposal. With oil prices on the rise, the administration and many in Congress seem to have forgotten that the oil industry actually provides Americans with energy and with jobs. And yet sometimes they're viewed as this untapped source of government revenues. Proposals to take more from oil companies have included a range of tax increases, the use it or lose it proposals, similar fees, substantially shorter lease terms. All of these anti-production efforts deprive the companies of stable operating environments. It reduces their willingness to invest in America. I think what we need to do is let's look at what we're doing. And if they're bad ideas, let's set the bad ideas aside. Let's adopt a constructive approach. Instead of seeking to punish, let's figure out a better way forward so that we can tap into more of America's vast resources and then make good use of the resulting revenues. Madam President, we clearly do have options, and I look forward to discussing them more in detail and how we can develop out these goals of a national energy policy. But for today, I would just wrap up by emphasizing that responsible domestic production will reduce our energy prices, create jobs, improve our security, raise revenue to pay down debt, and allow America to invest in technologies for the future. We can't afford to wait on any of these benefits. So I thank the President, and again, I urge us, as we're talking about ways that we reduce our budget, ways that we create more jobs for our country, we need to be looking critically at what is happening with our energy policy in this country. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Georgia.
Madam President, on the 27th of June, 2010, President Obama made the following statement, and I quote, he said, "I hope some of those folks who are hollering about deficits and debt will step up because I'm calling their bluff," end quote. Well, I'm stepping up. And at the same time, I also want to call the President's bluff because I think we're at a serious point in time in our history and we need to be realistic about what confronts us ahead of time. First of all, the biggest bluff this year in the Congress and in Washington was the 2012 budget presented by the President, which did not take any of the recommendations from his own deficit commission, which, by the way, I was one of the Republicans that supported his deficit commission, and instead locked in the 25.4% increase in spending over the last 2 years and made it permanent by calling it a freeze. Raises taxes in the out years and dedicates a higher regulatory environment in the United States of America. None of that does anything to reduce the debt or the deficit. In fact, the President's budget actually makes it worse. But it's fair to ask people to step up. The American people are asking us to step up. They want us to do what they've been doing the last 3 years. Sit around their kitchen table, reorganize their priorities, spend within their means, and reduce their debt and their deficit. The very least they should ask of their country is their country to do the same thing that they've had to do. And in large measure, we've been the contributor to the protracted nature of the current recession. Now, everybody knows that there are two ways you reduce the deficit in the short run and the debt in the long run. One way is to cut spending, but that's not the only way. Another way is to raise revenue and increase income, and that's not just by raising a tax, that's by improving business opportunity and expansion of opportunity in America. And there's a third way, by changing the processes by which you regulate and make decisions, by looking at reforms that in the out years make a difference for all of us. On the spending side, the spending cuts are going to be difficult. They're going to be modest compared to what our deficit really is, but they're going to send a signal to the world that we're finally going to get serious about our spending level. And the majority of the rest of the world already has, whether it's Great Britain or many of the other countries in the European Union. So spending cuts are important, but spending cuts in and of themselves will not solve the entire problem. In fact, H.R. 1 in the House, which made reductions of $61 billion, was a modest start at a long-term process. But it sent us in the right direction, and it called the bluff the President was talking about by making real significant proposals. Now, secondly, in terms of raising revenue, you raise revenue by expanding opportunity, not by raising the rate of tax, but as his deficit commission said, lowering the rate of tax, doing away with deductions that are specialized and targeted in nature, and give business the encouragement to expand. You know, a funny thing happened to me on January 3rd in Atlanta, Georgia this year, right after the 1st of January. I went to the OK Cafe in downtown Buckhead, Georgia, for a breakfast. That's the gathering place for most Atlanta business people on the north side of town. I was going to have a business meeting and walked in, and Steve Hennessy, one of the largest automobile dealers in the United States, happened to come up to me, and he rushed toward me, had his arms open. I thought I was going to get a good luck hug and go to Washington and do a good job type speech. Instead, he put his finger right on my nose and he said, "Johnny, I just had to hire 2 compliance officers to comply with Dodd-Frank, and I lost a salesman. I'm spending more money complying and less money producing." And that's one of the things this administration has done in tremendous quantity to put us in a very difficult situation. Every agency is promulgating rules and regulations at a rapid rate. Regulations that to comply with cost new employees, more expense in operating a business, less capital investment in what that business does. It's very important that the President understand what happens, and that is regulation has consequences. And right now, the regulatory volume of the United States being proposed by this administration is unsustainable. It's costly, and it reduces the debt and the deficit of the United States of America. And quite frankly, it's a reach far beyond where government should really go. I'm the first person to support occupational safety, the first person to support financial security, the first person to support transparency. I will always fight to see that our government is transparent and our rules are fair and our occupational safety is good. But to overreach, to go beyond our reach, is just wrong. I'll give you a couple of examples. Georgia is a large agricultural state. I was with some cotton farmers yesterday who were bemoaning the fact of the most recent proposal to regulate agricultural dust. EPA actually wants to regulate the dust created by a plow or a tractor or a truck on a dirt road on a farm to say the farmer must make sure that dust stays within the confines of his hedgerow or his fence lines. Meaning you're going to try and control nature? How is he going to do it? By hiring water trucks to follow behind his tractor to tamp down the dust? That's a reach too far. To categorize milk as oil and to say that farmers who run dairies have to have storage tanks for milk that are equivalent to storage tanks for petroleum. That's just crazy. It's a reach far too beyond. And what it does, it makes the ability to do business tougher, the ability to make a profit more impossible, the amount of revenue produced less because it's less profitable, and it protracts our debt and our deficit problem. So when the President talks about calling bluffs, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to sit down and talk about the hard things. In fact, I'm willing to tell the story about how, in certain measure, myself and everybody else born after 1943 in America is an example of some of the things we need to do. In 1983, I was 39 years old. The Social Security sent out their annual report on the stability of the Social Security Fund, and it said it's going broke. It said if we don't do something, we're going to run out of Social Security in the early 2000s. Well, that worried everybody. But Tip O'Neill, a great speaker and a Democrat, and Ronald Reagan got together at the White House, and they said, we've got a problem. And Ronald Reagan said, well, I don't want to raise the payroll tax. And Tip O'Neill said, I don't want to lower the amount of the benefit. And they looked at the actuary and said, what do we do? And he said, recast the eligibility. Push it into the out years, and that will get the system calibrated and back to actuarial soundness. And so they sat down with the actuaries at a table, and they said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to preserve everybody's Social Security eligibility today, but for those people born after 1943 and before 1947, we're pushing them out from age 65 to age 66. I was born in 1944. With the stroke of a pen, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill changed my eligibility by 1 year. But they changed mine and millions of other Americans at the lead of the baby boomers, recalibrated the system, and put Social Security and actuarial soundness until 2050. And then they added 2-month increments for eligibility beyond, where eventually the law now takes Social Security eligibility to 67. The President's Commission recommended doing a similar thing over the next 50 to 75 years to push eligibility out so that benefits aren't cut, eligibility is changed, but taxes don't go up, but eligibility is only changed in when you become eligible to collect. And we already know that when Social Security was formed originally, most people didn't live to the eligibility age of 65, and today most everybody does. Our lifespans have gone a long time, and that's what's gotten the system actuarially unsound. So I don't think it's right to say that nobody has answered the call on debt and deficit reduction. I don't think it's right to say that our bluff needs to fall. We haven't been bluffing anybody. Neither did the President's Debt and Deficit Commission. They called our hand by giving us consequential recommendations that work, that in the long term make the future of America bright. This problem is not a partisan problem, it's a bipartisan problem. The parties have contributed each to the other to cause the problem. We need to sit down together and begin solving it, but not making it political issues for the 2012 election with no solutions. Instead of bluffs, we ought to make constructive proposals. Instead of speeches on the floor that run time, we ought to be offering amendments on the floor that make a difference in terms of the debt and the deficit of the United States of America. This is the greatest country on the face of this earth, and it is because people trust it. But if we continue to look the other way as our debt and our deficit increases, that trust will dissipate and our interest rates will go up, the cost of goods and services will be inflated, and America will be in trouble. I close by telling a brief story about a speech I made in Albany, Georgia last year in November, when I was talking about the debt and the deficit, talking about some of the solutions we've talked about here. And I kept talking about $1 trillion this and $1 trillion that and saying, you know, one day soon we're going to owe $14 trillion. Farmer at the back of the room at the Rotary Club raised his hand and he said, Senator, I only went to Dougherty County High School. I don't know how much $1 trillion is. How much is it? Well, I stammered, and finally I said, well, it's a lot. I couldn't think of how to quantify it. Got home that night, my wife said, what's wrong with you? I said, well, I got stumped today. And she said, what was the question? I said, the question was, how much is a trillion? She said, what did you say? I said, well, it's a lot. She said, well, that's stupid. I said, well, give me a suggestion. And she's always right. She said, well, why don't you just figure out how many years have to go by for a trillion seconds to pass? Then people will understand how much $1 trillion is. And so I did the math. I multiplied 60 seconds times 60 minutes times 24 hours times 365 days. Got on the calculator, and the calculator when we went to 12 digits, so I had to go to the computer to get something to go to 13 digits, which is a trillion. And I divided that product into 1 trillion. And you know how many years have to pass for 1 trillion seconds to go by? 31,709. And we owe $14 trillion. At $1 a second for over 400,000 years, we could solve our problem. That is a huge problem. But we have the benefit of the time value of money and the hope and opportunity of the greatest country on the face of this earth. So I call the President's bluff. Let's sit down together and talk about the tough things. Let's talk about the shared sacrifice. Let's talk about the benefit that comes from responsibility, frugality, and a commitment to the principles of our founding fathers. And always remember the principle that less debt is better. We should never be a country controlled by those we owe. Instead, we ought to be a country loved by those we protect. And, Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Iowa is recognized. Without objection, so ordered.
I understand that there are questions about what the tax strategies portion of the bill does and who it impacts. So I want to take a few minutes to address those questions. In simple terms, a tax strategy is any method for reducing, avoiding, deferring tax liability based upon the tax law, including interpretations and application of the Internal Revenue Code, regulations, and related guidance. A tax strategy can be as simple as a plan to buy tax-exempt bonds or invest in an IRA to reduce your tax liability, or as complex as some sort of sales leaseback tax shelter involving multiple domestic and foreign corporations and partnerships. A tax strategy patent, which is what we're talking about in this bill, is just that, a patent on a particular tax strategy. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the an article in the record from a publication called Tax Advisor. This article provides some examples of tax strategy that shouldn't be patented. Tax strategies are bad because they allow the tax law to be patented. A patent gives the holder the exclusive right to exclude others from using the patented invention. A tax strategy patent makes taxpayers choose between paying more than legally required in taxes or providing a windfall to a tax strategy patent holder by paying a royalty to comply with the tax law. Tax strategy patents add another layer of complexity to the tax laws by requiring taxpayers or their advisors to conduct patent searches and expose them to potential patent infringement lawsuits. If a tax strategy patent is granted for a tax shelter designed to illegally evade taxes, the fact that a patent was granted may mislead unknowing taxpayers into believing the obvious, that the strategy is valid under the tax law, when in fact it might not be. Tax strategies are not like other inventions because everyone wants to pay less tax. Tax strategy patents are on the rise, which then means More and more legal tax strategies are unavailable or obviously more expensive for more and more taxpayers. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to insert a letter in the record at this point. This letter, which is from a coalition of 15 consumer groups, including the umbrella groups for public accountants, the Tax Justice Center, and the U.S. Public Interest Research Group, provides more information on why tax strategy patents are bad for taxpayers.
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay. Section 14 of the bill that's been before the Senate for the last week or more prevents patenting of tax law. It provides that a strategy that relies on the tax law to reduce, to avoid, or to defer tax liability cannot be novel or non-obvious. So a strategy for reducing, avoiding, or deferring tax liability will be deemed insufficient to differentiate a claimed invention from the prior art for purposes of evaluating an invention under Section 102 or Section 103 of the law of the bill that's before us. This ensures that taxpayers and their advisors will then be guaranteed equal access to the tax laws, and that's obviously the fair way to do it. It's the common sense way to do it. So, I want it to be clear that tax preparation software is not a tax strategy. Senior policy and examination staff from the Patent and Trademark Office agree that such software is not a tax strategy. I also have letters from H&R Block, KPMG, LLP, and Grant Thornton that state that the underlying language does not impact their software patents. Again, Madam President, I request unanimous consent that these letters be inserted in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
However, now, in order to allay the concerns of Intuit, makers of TurboTax, I have worked with Senator Baucus to make clear that tax preparation software like TurboTax is not a tax strategy. Financial management software, however, is a little murkier. While products like Quicken and QuickBooks are not tax strategies can be embedded in financial management products and software. The investment banks and the law firms that have patented tax strategies often use software that could be deemed financial management software. The tax advisor article I mentioned earlier and got unanimous consent to put in the record describes some of these. With financial management software, patent claims that include inventions that are severable from tax strategies may be entitled to patent protection, but the tax strategy itself will remain available to all taxpayers. So then it is important to protect intellectual property rights for true tax preparation and financial management software. However, we must be sure to protect the rights of taxpayers to have equal access legal tax strategies. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absent. Would you hold a minute?
Yeah. Quorum.
Yeah, I asked for a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Vermont is recognized, and we are in a quorum call.
Madam President, I just want to be recognized so I could ask unanimous consent to call out the quorum.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 662, the Surface Transportation Extension Bill. The bill will be read 3 times. The Senate proceed to vote and pass the bill. The motion to reconsider be considered made laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 662, an act to provide an extension of federal aid highway, highway safety, motor carrier safety, transit, and other programs, and so forth and for other purposes.
The clerk will read the bill for the 3rd time.
H.R. 662, an act to provide an extension of federal aid highway, highway safety, motor carrier safety, transit, and other programs, and so forth and for other purposes.
The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes appear to have it, and the bill is passed.
Move to reconsider and lay it on the table.
Without objection.
Madam President, I suggest the absent quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President,
Senator from Vermont.
I ask consent to call the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will report the pending business.
Calendar number 6, S23, a bill to amend Title 35, United States Code to provide for patent reform.
Madam President,
Senator from Vermont.
Madam President, since this debate began, we've heard a lot about how the American Invents Act will help unleash the American inventive spirit. I know the distinguished presiding officer has spoken about that. Well, let me, with a matter of personal pride, point out that Vermonters have a long history of innovation and invention. And it's that creative spirit that has given rise to some interesting and even revolutionary inventions. Few people may know that Vermont issued the most patents per capita of any state in the country. Fewer still may know that the first ever patent issued in the United States, reviewed by Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson and signed by George Washington, was granted to a Vermonter in 1719. It was Samuel Hopkins of Pittsburgh. He began the great tradition of American innovation.
deadline coming the next day or so. And I applaud the efforts of both sides to work together to make that happen. Speaking of competitiveness, it's very difficult for a government to function having short-term CRs every 2 weeks. And what I would urge while this work is going on the floor, I would urge the House and the Senate, both sides of the aisle, to work towards a longer-term CR. I know that we're working on reductions in spending which have to take place to keep our government in check and to keep our country in the place that it needs to be. But the work that we need to do to fund government for the rest of the year is actually the easy work that we're going to be facing as it relates to spending. And I saw today where Vice President Biden has been asked by the White House, by the President, to take a lead on this issue. I take that as a good sign. I saw Secretary Geithner earlier today. I know he's planning on engaging in this issue, but I would just urge that we go ahead and do the work that we need to do. We all know that there are going to be some painful and tough decisions coming. A lot of people who've been down on the floor arguing, debating against spending cuts are talking about the havoc that it's going to create for government. But I imagine Secretary Gates, who's over at the Defense Department trying to deal with all kinds of overseas operations, trying to deal with investing in the future, other agencies of government, would much rather see what these cuts are going to be and plan accordingly versus working on a 2-week CR every 2 weeks. So, Madam President, I'm just urging that we go ahead and do the tough work that we have to do. All of us know it's going to be painful. All of us know we're going to have to prioritize. All of us know there will be a number of constituencies around the country that will be less than happy. But for the good of our country, let's go ahead and together, Democrats and Republicans, independents and the administration, work together towards a solution. I know the House has sent over a continuing resolution bill that takes us through the rest of the year. We have not yet seen what the Democratic Senate majority might offer in that regard. It's my hope that something's being worked on. But I think the American people, I think the functioning of this government, those who cause this government to function need to know what those cuts are going to be, where we're going. And speaking on that note, and I'll close with this, one of the things that's most frustrating to me as a United States Senator that came from a world of business is we never know where we're going. We debate the current issues. We never plan for the future. And I hope as a part of all this that we're doing this spring, this incredible opportunity that we have in this body to deal with the issue of spending, to deal with the issue of deficits, it's my hope that as a part of this, what we will do is pass a global cap on spending, a comprehensive cap on spending that takes us from where we are today into a place that's been our 40-year historic average. Claire McCaskill on the other side of the aisle has joined me and many others in something called the CAP Act. It's the type of responsible legislation that we need to pass to get our country back where it needs to be. We all know we have a huge spending problem today. There are many explanations for that. But as a country, to make ourselves competitive, as the senator from Vermont was just talking about, and I'm sure the senator from Iowa is getting ready to talk about, we also need to make sure we keep our fiscal house in order. Let's get on with it. Let's go ahead and deal with these tough issues. Let's solve this problem for this year and move on to the longer-term issue. Madam President, I thank you. To the senator from Vermont, I thank you for your courtesy, and I yield the floor.